Hello and welcome to the 2024 SPS Global Insights annual forecast. Throughout the year, we've closely monitored the escalating threats of kidnapping, ransom and extortion worldwide. In today's special edition, we delve into the global threat actors and the dynamic landscape of kidnap, ransom and extortion crimes projecting into 2024. Joining us today are SPS intelligence analysts Robert Hodgkinson and Simon Fraser alongside Martin Barnes, Deputy Director of Crisis Management, who bring a wealth of practical experience in handling these delicate situations. And Rob joins us first. So Rob, if we focus on a global scale, would you be able to identify the regions that you feel would be the most volatile for KRE activities throughout 2024?
So our analysis suggests that in Latin America, we're anticipating an awful lot more violence there in the coming year. That's all based around a lot more corruption and the cartels being more active due to the upcoming elections in places like Mexico. Then across the Atlantic, we're also seeing increased threat levels in the Sahel region, and in South Africa, there's a lot of crime going on there, which involves kidnap, ransom, and extortion too. Moving up, we go to Europe, and that's often a place that's forgotten when we're talking about kidnap, ransom, and extortion. But there's issues there as well, particularly in the Balkans. We're seeing geopolitical destabilization in that region, so that's increasing kind of the motivation for criminal groups to move into that part of the world and start operating there. And finally, in the Asia-Pacific region, we're seeing that ISIS groups that have been displaced from the Middle East are operating in those parts of the world, so in the Philippines and places like that.
And a big thanks to Rob there for his insights. And we're going to move on to Simon now, who's going to tell us a little bit more about other threat actors. Simon, it's quite clear from listening to Rob explain the threat of KRE on a global scale that really everybody is at risk. Nobody is safe, certainly going into 2024.
Absolutely. I think nobody ever thinks they're going to be, at risk from, a kidnapping event, but, it does happen. State actors and, state detainments are one of, they're growing in frequency, we've seen with the recent conflict in Israel-Gaza, as well in places like Russia and China, we're seeing an increased rate of both domestic and foreign nationals being detained.
Unlawfully detained, I'm assuming.
Unlawfully detained, correct, yes. So often, in places like Russia, you can be arbitrarily picked out at an airport or even sometimes from the street, you could be taken away and questioned.
And what's the fallout from that, assuming that the people who are being detained are non-nationals?
Well, it's very difficult, particularly with the sort of international place that Russia's ended up with the conflict in Ukraine, with diplomatic relations being incredibly strained. It's very difficult for foreign nationals to get any sort of diplomatic assistance from outside of the country.
From an analytical point of view, Simon, do you see these unlawful detentions increasing?
Absolutely. I think we're definitely expecting an increase. I think lots of the KRE sort of risk is closely linked to sort of geopolitical stability, across the globe. So when we see, increased tensions with America and China over Taiwan, or the current conflict, in the Israel-Gaza conflict, we're already seeing sort of a ramping up of terrorist groups that use KRE methods in Africa and places like Iraq. We've also seen a series of hijackings off the coast of Yemen, by groups like the Houthis who have close links to Tehran. So I think definitely going into 2024, we're going to see an increase, as well as what Rob's already mentioned about destabilization in the Sahel with the withdrawal of French troops and the several coups. We're likely going to be seeing a sort of rapid increase going into next year.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
Thanks to Simon Fraser there for sharing his expert opinion with us. Now, 2023 was an extremely busy year for the crisis management team at SPS, who responded in a number of theatres across the globe. And the Deputy Director of the Crisis Management team, Martin Barnes, is with us now to expand on what we've already learned from the intelligence team. Martin, as someone who is deeply involved in day-to-day crisis management situations, what are the key lessons that we've learned throughout 2023?
I think 2023 has been a really interesting year for crisis management. Ultimately, I think 2023 will be remembered for the Ukraine Ukraine-Russia conflict, which has had a real effect on the rest of the world, and now, of course, Israel and Gaza. And those two events actually have really global reach. So we've seen a kind of a change in the strategy of both NATO and the US. And as they move their operations, that allows other threat actors that have been dormant, such as the Somali pirates, to raise their heads again. So 2023, a really interesting year. I think technology's been the main key about it.
But I think that what you're saying there is so fascinating, because if you go back 40 or 50 years, there might have been one threat actor at play at any one time on a global stage. And so all of the relevant authorities were dealing with one crisis. Now you have multiple crises across various different continents. And as you mentioned, these dormant threat actors are now coming to the fold. They're realizing there's an opportunity there. People's security systems might be weakened. Their attention is elsewhere onto, impending or the threat of war or conflict. And so you have now multiple issues to deal with, potentially in one particular country. Yeah,
and I think they spread quite amazingly. So if you go back 40 years ago, we all have that vision of people being kidnapped, held in the jungle, the paper being in front of them. But the reality is now that express kidnapping and virtual kidnapping can happen anywhere in any city, whether it be first world or third world. And we need to adapt to that threat. So where we talked about increased risk of countries, actually the whole global function is increased. And if you look at countries like Sweden now, who are really struggling with organised crime, which has actually moved west from eastern countries because of some of the geopolitical issues that are going on there.
So the effects are far-reaching.
Absolutely, and it's shifting sands. But you are right. I think that there are a number of conflicts and a number of sort of issues going along in the world, which we get very focused on. And we then start to see what were dormant or new emerging threats come to the surface. That's how criminal gangs work, don't they? If they see an opportunity and it works, then why not do it? And when we were talking about express kidnapping earlier on, the reason it works is because they don't want to get caught. They don't have to spend a lot of money investing looking after the kidnapped victim. But to make it pay, it's got to be high frequency, low yield. So more people are actually at risk. So instead of just the one person being held for 3 or 4 months for the large payment, you're actually now talking about to get the same amount of money, you're talking about 50 victims instead of one. And it's always going to be travellers, because we look out of place. When we go to a foreign country, you can tell exactly who belongs and who doesn't belong. And it's that reason that we're targeted.
You also mentioned 2023 as the year of the virtual kidnapping. Mm-hmm. And I find this evolution in technology incredible, because it's so advantageous to us in so many different ways. And yet criminals seem to have absolutely taken to it with both hands, and in a way are a step ahead, potentially, of the authorities.
I think if you look at criminality has always been able to adapt new technology to their own means. The frightening thing about virtual kidnapping, and the case that everybody talks about, is the case in America where a mother paid the kidnappers because she thought that her daughter had been taken, and all they did was manipulate her daughter's image and voice, but she was convinced she was talking to her daughter, so paid the money.
And I think that case resonated with so many people, because it just showed that it could happen to anybody, and the fact that the voice was imitated and the photos as well.
But the reality is the voice is her daughter. Yeah. All it is the technology is just adjusting that. So you are speaking to your daughter and somebody is threatening serious harm to your daughter, you're going to pay. And I think that is going to be a challenge for us in 2024. And crisis management always has to evolve. We have to be in front of the trends as much as we can. But that is a real challenge. And I think that preparation, especially for our insured clients, our preparation before you travel is going to become absolutely key, not just in 2024, but the years going forward, because technology moves at such a fast pace.
And so that's something that every traveller will just be mindful of in the future, whereas perhaps we might have been a little bit dismissive of it in the past. We think it's never going to happen to me.
Now we can be affected by global events that are really going to have an impact for us. So for a commercial traveller, I think it's absolutely vital to ensure that you've got the right coverage. But the key to it is being prepared before you go as well. So that whether it's your crisis management team within your organisation or the individual traveller themselves.
You mentioned multiple challenges there that people have been dealing with over the last 12 months, specifically in the security industry. But going into 2024, what strategies do you have in place to deal with these challenges?
So we're always looking forward and horizon scanning to see what's going on, and that's why we work alongside our intelligence research team very closely to understand what the evolving threats are. We then spend a lot of time investing in training of our consultants in those emerging threats, but also we want to train our clients as well. So we want our clients to understand what risks they may be facing and how to mitigate that risk at the earliest opportunity. And I think that's the real drive for 2024. I think, the days of I've got the insurance, I don't need to do anything else are way behind us.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
So wishing everyone a happy and safe 2023 and into 2024. Martin, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
A big thank you to our guests today for their valuable insights. We hope our audience found this SPS annual forecast both informative and enlightening. We encourage you all to delve into our comprehensive threat actor reports for a more in-depth analysis. Join us next month as we continue to unravel the evolving dynamics in the world of kidnap, ransom, extortion and piracy.